25 Republicans, 24 Democrats. This bill has sat in limbo for more than a year.
Yeah.
And so, in that time, though, the DOT, including Pete Buttigieg, as we mentioned, they have explicitly made it clear that truck parking is an issue that needs to be addressed. So this letter is basically a friendly reminder to House leadership that this truck parking is still a nationwide problem that affects everyone. And hey, here's this bill that's going to address that. Here it is at your doorstep, just waiting for you to pick it up.
Thanks, Mark. Scott here. Tyson's there.
I am. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for being here. Always good to see you. Let's jump right in here with the latest out of Congress and what they are, and I guess more importantly, not doing about the truck parking problem. We've got one Chamber of Commerce trying to dedicate a good chunk of change toward the problem, and we're not quite there yet, but they're trying.
Yeah, so what happened recently, the House Appropriations Committee, they approved the fiscal year 2025 Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Appropriations bills. It's a long way of saying this is how the House is telling the DOT how to spend its allowance. Basically, is what it comes down to. Here's your money, but this is how you're going to spend it.
Yeah.
There's
some big allowance.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Some trucking provisions in there, which is always nice. One of which was $200 million dedicated for truck parking projects. Very similar in language to the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act in that those projects cannot include paid parking. So it's got to be free parking. $200 million. So that passed the House committee, and it's just kind of waiting a full vote by the House. But meanwhile, the Senate bill has their own appropriations committee on the T-HUD bill. And unlike the House version, this one does not include money allocated specifically for truck parking spaces. So we have the House bill that wants to give $200 million dedicated for truck parking. The Senate bill does not. If past bills are any indicator, the Senate version is likely to win out on this. So,
right.
So what that means is that it probably likely the final bill probably will not include dedicated funding for truck parking. That's kind of what I'm bracing myself for the most part. So on one hand, it's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
We want that dedicated funding, and we were so close to getting that. But on the other hand, $200 million is significantly less than the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act, which is $755 million. And, you don't want to, look a gift horse in the mouth with that $200 million. But getting that $200 million from the appropriations bill, it could reduce the odds of the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act from crossing the finish line. The logic here is that Congress may find that a bill that dedicates money for truck parking, like the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act, would be unnecessary because they just took care of that in the appropriations bill. So you'd be kind of like a possible trade-off of that $200 million when you could have got $755 million. That's speculation. That's kind of looking at how things could have gone.
Right.
But that's kind of one way to look at it. The silver lining of this is that it puts the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act back into play. It always has been in play, to be fair.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes it, more important to do something about that, and so that's kind of why everyone needs to really focus on that Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act, do something about that. Again, if your lawmaker is not a co-sponsor, fightingfortruckers.com, it takes 60 seconds to really, let them know about that.
And if you haven't done that already, just to kind of underline your point, now is the time to do it.
Oh, for
because
sure.
a new session of Congress is coming up real fast. I don't know. It's an election year. You would think, and I've said this before, you would think that these lawmakers would love to pass a bipartisan piece of legislation that is going to make people happy. And it's not just a happy thing. It's a safety thing, as we've talked about time and time again. So if you haven't done that yet, or even if you have, I suppose, you can still reach out and just tell your lawmaker to get on board here, because now really is the time to do it.
Sure.
Because if we don't do it before January, we got to start the whole process over again.
Yeah,
which, we've got the groundwork laid for it, but why start over when we've got it right there?
I know. A lot of momentum going right now. So, yeah.
Yes. I will stay cautiously not exactly optimistic, but again, it's up to the people out there to kind of make this happen here. We've talked about all of the options here with truck parking. There are a number of them. We're seeing some progress here and there. One area where I do take some sort of satisfaction from here is that we've talked about the DOT seems to understand that this needs to get done.
Yeah.
Transportation Secretary Buttigieg has talked about this multiple times in multiple settings in the media, before the House, and in hearings and whatnot, basically calling on them to get something done because, as he points out, there's only so much the DOT can do, right. without some help.
Right. So, Buttigieg recently sat down with an industry drive for about 40 minutes to talk about all things that are supply chain, a very broad topic, but truck parking was brought up during this conversation. Kind of what you pointed out, he emphasized the fact that truck parking is very much a safety issue, while also acknowledging the fact that there is no dedicated funding for truck parking. And so, in a way, it's just kind of just my interpretation of that interview was he kind of passed the buck to the state DOTs by pointing out that they have access to discretionary funding to address their respective truck parking shortage, right? And that has been the case for several years. And to be fair, most federal DOT funding is in the form of what's called formula funding. So basically, they have all their money. It has to be, basically the states, DOTs kind of fight for it under certain programs. And so, and truck parking projects have been, eligible for many of these programs. The problem here is, and we talked about this before, state DOTs have to prioritize their own problems, their own projects. And when you're applying for very limited federal funding, truck parking is very likely to lose to the more high-profile projects, like highway, interstate widenings, and things that the general public they think affects them more directly. And obviously, there's the argument that truck parking absolutely does, but again, that's a whole nother conversation. But so yeah, it's true. There is plenty of money available to states for truck parking. It's just the money isn't being used for that purpose. So do want to give credit where credit is due, which is the DOT under Buttigieg has awarded a relatively significant amount of money towards truck parking in just the past few years.
Yeah.
More than any other DOT before him. And he kind of pointed that out during that industry drive interview where he said that the DOT has added hundreds of truck parking spaces in recent funding rounds, which is great.
But hundreds isn't going to cut it.
Exactly where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
We need tens of thousands of truck parking spaces, and there's only two ways to do that: dedicated funding from the federal government, or private sector investment, which we know comes in the form of paid parking. So that's kind of why we really need the federal government to step up to the plate and really get that dedicated funding on the table.
And really, again, I think just to emphasize this, now is the time to make that push. And I know there was a coalition, including OIDA, that sent a letter to the leaders of the House, the majority and minority leaders there, saying, get this done. Let's go. Let's do
right. This. Again, going back to that Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act, so more than a dozen trade associations led by OOIDA sent a letter to House Speaker Mike Johnson and the Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, basically urging them to put that bill on the floor for consideration. Here's the thing. That bill cleared the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee with a 60-4 vote in May of last year, okay? So despite swiftly moving through committee and then garnering broad bipartisan support, 25 Republicans, 24 Democrats, this bill has sat in limbo for more than a year. It's so, in that time, though, the DOT, including Pete Buttigieg, as we mentioned, they have explicitly made it clear that truck parking is an issue that needs to be addressed. So this letter is basically a friendly reminder to House leadership that this truck parking is still a nationwide problem that affects everyone. And hey, here's this bill that's going to address that. Here it is at your doorstep, just waiting for you to pick it up. And so. It really is the ball's in the court of the speaker. This kind of way that's the way it works. The majority leadership pretty much decides what bills get in, what bills don't. So hopefully they pick that up. And it was mostly trucking associations that signed off on this letter, but there were a few others, including the American Apparel and Footwear Association, the American Chemistry Council, and the Consumer Brands Association. It's important to highlight that they were on board too, because this highlights how this is a major issue that affects everybody, and it affects the supply chain in general, which basically what they're trying to say is it's putting a strain on the supply chain, and the people who suffer from that ultimately comes down to the consumer. Prices increase, and that price increase with shipping and whatnot, it is being borne on the consumers.
Yeah, I didn't have the Footwear Association on my bingo card, but
neither did I. I saw that. I was like, okay.
Yeah,
sure.
It makes sense, though, when you
does.
explain it the way you explained it there. So there you go. Hey, one more thing before we let you go here. Last time you were here, I think it was the last time you were here, we were talking about the Jason's Law survey. We are, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I believe we're in the information collection stage right now.
We are.
But it's important to speak out, and OIDA did recently. Yeah. I don't think a lot of people have, right?
Well, yeah.
And I think that's maybe an understatement.
Yeah. So in May, the Federal Highway Administration, they issued a notice basically letting everyone know that they are planning on collecting information for the third version of Jason's Law survey. That's that nationwide truck parking study.
Right.
They were soliciting comments on, it's like, hey, how should we go about collecting this information? And so they had a 1-month comment period, and they received exactly one comment.
It was one. Okay, yeah. That's what I thought, and I thought I don't want to overstate here or understate. But
there was one comment,
it was one.
Just a single one, and of course, OIDA was the one that filed that comment, and so whereas the first survey was a nearly 200-page report, the second version was a short PowerPoint presentation. So OOIDA was basically saying, hey, this next one, this third one, let's more like the original. That was good.
More information is
more
better.
Information, all that comprehensive, information. And it's very extensive and it's very useful. The second one, not so much. But OOIDA in its comments also pointed out that since the last Jason's Law survey, there has been a significant rise in private sector investment in the form of paid parking spots. That's something you and I have been talking about a lot lately.
Yep.
OOIDA, it wants the next truck parking survey to examine that aspect of this truck parking situation. And the thing is, the association is absolutely right about that. The first two surveys, it looked only at rest areas and truck stops, which made sense back then. But in 2024, you can't have a complete truck parking analysis without looking at all the paid spots that are popping up like crazy, just left and right, with companies like Outpost and like the Truck Parking Club. So hopefully they read those comments and they include that in this third version of the parking survey. Yeah.
I'm going to say it one more time, fightingfortruckers.com,
Yes.
The Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act. Get your lawmakers on board here. It's really going to take a final push here, and you've got the power to make it happen, and put some pressure on our leaders there in Washington, D.C. Tyson, we appreciate it. Appreciate your work on Landline.media and in Landline Magazine, and we'll talk to you again soon.
I appreciate you having me.
And we've got more show coming your way, but not before a short commercial break. So hang tight. We're back right after this.